Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, where we simplify the complexities of your leadership journey. My name is Mo, and I'll be sitting in the host chair today. My guest is Kate Lowry, a CEO coach, venture capitalist, and author based in Silicon Valley. Kate has worked with some of the world's most influential organizations, McKinsey, Meta, Insight Partners, helping executives and teams navigate challenges in high-pressure moments. Her new book, Unbreakable, How to Thrive Under Fear-Based Leadership, empowers professionals to recognize, respond to, and rise above fear-driven behavior in the workplace. Kate combines her personal story of growing up in a hierarchical family with her experiences in big tech to offer powerful insights for anyone who's ever felt powerless under intimidation-driven leadership. You're going to want to hear this one. Kate, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Mo.
Yes, first of all, congratulations on your new book. Before we get to that, Kate, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you came from, and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in the Midwest in Ohio, and I'd always been pretty interested in entrepreneurship. I started my first companies in high school and college, and then I wanted a harder skill set to offer them. And so I joined McKinsey, which was kind of like an amazing business boot camp. You know, every 2 months you're dropped inside a different Fortune 500 company, got to figure out its problems and get the leadership to step up and do what's right. And in that time, I realized I really did like working with young companies. So I worked in corporate venture, spent some time at an AI startup, and then moved into Meta, where I worked in product strategy, helping the company decide what products to build, buy, or kill. And throughout this time, I kind of noticed how deeply lonely leaders are. You know, they can't go to their board above them and say, "Help, I don't know what I'm doing." And they feel like they have to look strong for the people below them. And at Meta, we really thought about treating everything, including yourself, as a product to be iterated. But I missed working with early stage folks, so I moved back into venture capital. And it was working with the venture CEOs that I really noticed a new trend. Leadership styles go in and out of vogue, just like bell bottom jeans. Around a year ago, I started hearing the same thing from everybody in Silicon Valley. I'd be at my running group or volunteering, and everyone would be going, "Man, I'm working with such a difficult leader. I can't do anything right. I feel so stressed." My CEOs were saying, "Oh, my investors are being so difficult. I don't know what's going on." And that's what led me to write my book.
Talk to me a little bit more about the moment when you realized that fear-based leadership had become a pattern across all industries and why you felt like you wanted to address it.
Definitely. So I've had 30 managers in my career. And when I first started out, about 3 in 10 used this leadership style. And they were really easy to identify. You know, the ex military leader who would come in and scream at the team and make everyone jump too. And maybe the sneaky or covert malevolent leader who was throwing people under the bus, things like that. But it wasn't the majority. And then in the last 5 years of my career, about 7 in 10 of the different leaders I interacted with were fear based leaders. And that was really a sea change. I know that I worked in some sharp elbowed industries, finance, startups, tech, but it started to be something that people feel is really inescapable. It's created a jumping from the frying pan into the fire. My friends were leaving companies to find something better, finding something else that was bad in a different way. And it was at that point that I realized, even though my CEOs were panicking or feeling overwhelmed or freezing or spinning out, I was actually totally fine. And it was at that point that I knew that I had a skill set other people didn't have. And I was like, oh my gosh, the world desperately needs a tactical guide that teaches people how to retain autonomy and agency when they're around these really difficult types of leaders.
So, Kate, why do you think you had that skill set that others don't? Can you tell me a little bit about your personal upbringing, and did that prepare you to recognize some of these patterns early on? What was it that got you ready for this?
Definitely. So my upbringing was perhaps a bit unusual. My parents are both fear-based leaders themselves. So by fear-based, it means anyone who looks at a power dynamic and says, power, I'm going to abuse that. And so my parents were very difficult, cruel, capricious, constantly changing the rules, manipulative, all of these things that you often see in other types of communities, whether that's volunteer communities or businesses. And essentially, it meant that I had a training ground for 20 years to run experiments on them. How do I make sure that I have access to the things I need, I care about, access to having friendships, making sure that I get the food I need, the extracurriculars I want. And it created kind of an incentive structure for me to repeatedly test ways that I could de escalate very tense situations, ways that I could negotiate with people who negotiate in bad faith, and so on. And so when I entered the business world, in the business world, I've had 8 fear-based leaders as bosses, and I came in much more prepared for this type of devious, I'm going to step on you like type of behavior than I think most people were. And I had a chance to refine it across all the different companies that I founded and worked for.
Kate, you've said that domineering leaders are becoming more common, even in industries where collaboration is key.
Yeah.
Why do you think that kind of leadership style is spreading right now?
I think it's spreading because I'm noticing a lot of insecurity and also permissiveness. So, fear based leaders are called fear based because they themselves are motivated by fear. Their subconscious whispers to them, am I good enough? Will they ever like me? If they don't like me, will they at least fear me? And so, fear is what gets them out of bed in the morning and is what they know. So, they use it to motivate others. It's also the easy path. It's genuinely hard to be a mature, nuanced, thoughtful, intentional leaders. And I think that a lot of people get to the top of the ladder and they think, now I can finally do whatever I want. And when they realize they're in a complex web of stakeholders that makes it very hard to take unilateral action, it makes them want to lash out with power, control, and rigidity. But culturally, we're also seeing this, in TV shows. When you look at Game of Thrones, Succession, Billions, House of Cards, you've got these not so great people at the top. And I think a lot of folks go in and they're like, yeah, I want to be like Frank Underwood. Or, yeah, I'm gonna be like Cersei without realizing it.
Well, Kate, I think I've got some problems because I think you named all of my favorite shows. Psychologically, there's probably something wrong with Mo, but let's stay on that. Talking about the psychology of the fear based leader, are there telltale signs that somebody is leading from fear rather from leading from confidence?
Yes, definitely. If you're around a fear-based leader, there's a certain feeling you get that it's like, "Oh, man, I feel like I have to walk on eggshells. Like, gosh, I just don't know if I can say anything right. No matter what I do, I feel like I'm wrong." But more than that, in psychology, these folks would be called dark triad folks, which means they have a mix of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and sociopathy. And essentially, what it means is that they have very low empathy and a really strong self orientation. And so, if you start working with someone and it seems like they cannot understand your point of view, moreover, they don't care about your point of view, and they have a kind of a iron fist in the velvet glove or a might makes right type of philosophy, in Silicon Valley, we're hearing a lot of CEOs saying, get in line or get out. You can either get with the program or I don't want you here. And I think that's definitely a hallmark of a fear based leader.
For those working under fear based leaders, are there practical first steps that they can take to safeguard their confidence and their emotional health?
Yes, absolutely. So, first of all, people like this are really draining to be around. And so you have to be very mindful of protecting your own energy. And so I tell people, write down a list of 5 things that fill your cup, activities that you do that make you feel more energized afterwards, whether that's spending time with your kids, playing soccer, baking, walking your dog. And make sure that if you're around a fear based leader, you're doing those things at least 3 times a week so that you're recharging. Because my book has lots of tactical strategies to help you retain power. But if you're pouring from empty, you just won't be able to, go in and implement them. And then, secondly, it's really important to make sure that the environment that you're in with a fear based leader is not your only source of identity. And a lot of people don't realize that identities are kind of like legs on a stool. And if you only have one identity, if someone comes along and kicks out the one leg under your stool, you collapse, you fall over. And so I tell people to make a list of all of the things that make them them. Maybe you're a father and a coach and a pastor and, really good at video games and you're a dog owner and all these different things so that if a fear-based leader comes along and says, "You're incompetent, I don't like you, you're worthless," you're like, "Okay, well, that's just your opinion because I have all of these different things that tell me, no, I like who I am, and I have multiple aspects to who I am."
Kate, you coach a lot of CEOs and executives. When somebody reads your book, is it for somebody a mid-level management leadership position? And how can people use your book to help their specific situation?
Yes, definitely. So my book can work for some CEOs, but more than that, it's targeted for people who are around difficult CEOs, difficult leaders, whether that's, the head of your Girl Scouts group or, someone in your life who has power and abuses it for some reason. It's really meant for people who feel like they're powerless, they have no hope, there's nothing they can do because someone somewhere is making their life really miserable. Fear-based leaders are kind of like the schoolyard bullies once they grow up. They've missed a lot of kindergarten lessons about how to be a person. And for the other people around them, they just find, more grown-up ways to make them unhappy.
Kate, you talk a lot about maintaining agency and autonomy. How can leaders keep their sense of self when manipulation or intimidation is present at work?
Definitely. So, first of all, I say in my book, you need to identify your values. Your values are what going to determine your actions in any situation that's unfamiliar to you. And as long as you have integrity to your values, you're going to be able to retain some of your sense of self. But secondly, people need to understand what their non negotiables are. What initiatives are you going to protect at all costs? What initiatives are you willing to sacrifice? And what are the red lines? What will you not do? If a fear-based leader tells you to do something illegal or, tells you to do something that really conflicts with your ethics, what are you going to say? How are you going to say it? Because a lot of times situations like that take people by surprise. So you need to really think about them in advance.
Kate, what's the difference between confronting a fear-based leader and outsmarting one? And how do you decide when it's time to speak up versus strategically disengage?
Yeah, I think that confrontations in general tend to have poor outcomes. Fear-based leaders feed on attention and they love getting big reactions. They want to know they've made you unhappy. If you yell at them about it, they feel like they've won. And so instead, when you don't like something, it's up to you to tell the fear-based leader this is not a good idea because of these reasons that align with the fear based leader's incentives. If they feel like it's in their self interest, they'll make the choice that you want. And you can also, pretend you don't understand their instructions, like play dumb. They think everyone around them is incompetent anyway. You can delegate something to someone else if you're not comfortable doing it yourself, and so on. There's a lot of different ways to play it between doing nothing and confronting someone.
I'd like to talk about leading from courage and building unbreakable cultures.
Mhm.
What can healthy leaders learn from fear-based leaders, even if it's learning what not to do?
Certainly. It's like the exact opposite of what someone should do. So the opposite of fear-based leadership, I call strengths-based leadership. And this type of leadership comes from people who are secure in themselves and like themselves. When you like yourself, it's possible for you to like the people around you. And that means that you can be supportive and also understanding of how to unlock everyone else's potentials. The best leaders do what only they can do, and then they get out of the way and empower their teams to succeed around them. And that's very different than a fear based leader, which will micromanage all of their teams and not let anyone do anything without their direct say so or supervision. And so you can see how a strengths based leader will promote way more innovation, way more sustainability, they'll have lower attrition, and so on.
So, have you ever seen a confrontation done well that actually changed the toxic dynamic?
Yeah, and there is one scenario in my book where I do recommend calling out fear-based leader behavior. And that is particularly around when fear-based leaders will try to deny your reality. It's where you might say, "No, you can't do that. That's blackmail." And the leader says, "You're wrong. You don't know what you're seeing. There's nothing to see here. Like, continue on with your day." It's very important to nip that in the bud, and say, "No, I know what I'm seeing. I believe in what is right and true." Because otherwise, fear-based leaders will start to tell you, that you're in kind of an alternate reality, a different world. You're actually really happy here. You're not unhappy. Like, you should stay here forever because you wanna be here. And so that's something that you do not wanna like.
Kate, how do we make sure that our own leadership doesn't drift into fear tactics when the pressure mounts?
Oh, it's genuinely hard. You know, I was raised to be a fear-based leader, and so when I'm very stressed, I have to be really mindful that that style does not come out in my own life. And I think that a lot of it is about maintaining your own emotional regulation so that you can say, wow, I am getting really stressed here. I feel like maybe I'm not being my best self. I'm going to step back and take a break. Let's splash some cold water on my face. I'm going to, do some deep breathing, whatever it is that you need to do, because you'll notice. I find that my values are very strong, and when I do things that are against my values, I have a little jangling inside my brain. And so if you hear that jangling, it's a moment to stop and step back and say, have I been in fire drill mode too long? What can I do to settle and ground myself before moving?
Kate, in your coaching experience, what differentiates strong leaders from intimidating ones?
Yeah. So strong leaders are leaders who are unafraid to be vulnerable. They are unafraid to be inauthentic. They're unafraid to admit that they don't know things, and they're unafraid to ask for help. That takes much more strength than saying, it's my way or the highway. I'm on top of the pyramid. Get in line or get out. I consider that type of leadership to be really weak because it's the easy path. It gets very narrow, short-term results, but ultimately, it chokes innovation, causes attrition problems, people around them are unhappy, and it just doesn't work out very well.
Yeah. So, how can a leader project authority without breeding fear?
Certainly. So leaders can be firm, they can be confident, they can be assertive. There's a difference between being assertive and being aggressive. Assertive might sound like, these are our goals for the next quarter. All of them are very important. I'm going to walk you through them. Let's talk about any questions that you have, and then we'll be moving on. Aggression might sound like, you guys are idiots. How dare you not do these goals? I told them to you 2 weeks ago, and they're not done yet.
Right.
It's pretty different.
Do you have a success story of somebody who was leading at a fear-based leadership and made the change and you said, "Wow, you've got it."
I haven't seen that many leaders change because it's genuinely hard, but I can tell you that I've seen myself change. And
Huh.
until I was old enough to understand that this type of behavior was not normal and not okay, it was my normal and it was what I was used to. But I didn't like it. I didn't like how being around it made me feel. I didn't like who I was when I tried to use fear based tactics. And once I realized there was a better path available, I said, okay, I'm pulling the car over, I'm retooling my engines, like I'm going to completely rework how I view the world, how I communicate with the world, and so on, so that I'm someone that I like being. And, I'm not perfect, no one is, but most of the time, I like who I am. And I find that being someone who's strengths based rather than fear based is what allows me to care very deeply about the world.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You haven't seen a lot of people be able to change from that. So is there any hope for those of us out there who deal with that and we do want to become better, we do want to change? How do we start? Where do we go?
There's certainly help for everyone. I think that until your very last day on earth, there's a chance to be someone different than who you are now. And for different people, that starts in different places. Maybe you do hire a coach who holds you accountable and teaches you new ways of being. Maybe you go to therapy. Maybe have a mentor or a sponsor in a church group. There are people in the world who are going to be willing to spend time with you and say, you are worth investing in. I believe you deserve to be someone that you like being, and you're brave to try something different.
So, Kate, my audience is listening. I'm guessing that people are saying, wow, I want to change. I want to be that kind of person. I want to be that kind of leader. I want my company to run that way. So, how can organizations intentionally cultivate courage and trust instead of fear and silence?
That's a really good question. I think that it helps first by role modeling. If you're a leader, show that you trust. If you're a leader, show that you believe in your team. And then it's about celebrating things that celebrate safety. So, for example, I tell a lot of my CEOs every week pick a mistake or failure to celebrate across your company. What did you learn from it? Something went wrong. How did you grow as a team because of it? Because otherwise, fear based leaders end up with major problems hidden under the rug because people are scared to share them. And then, secondly, create spaces where people are allowed to contribute big ideas. From your lowest customer service rep all the way up to your C suite, everyone else in the company has a vantage point that you don't. And so, create forums where people can throw out ideas based on what they're seeing, welcome those ideas, celebrate those ideas. And that's where innovation comes from.
Oh, I love that. So, for someone who's listening, they feel trapped under a fear based boss right now. What can they start to do? What would you like for them to remember after reading your book?
Definitely. So, first of all, you're not alone and there is hope. These leaders will tell you, you're powerless, you're nothing without me, resistance is futile, blah, blah, blah. Don't believe them. You're not powerless. You're actually really powerful. But you do probably need to learn a new toolkit to protect yourself because these types of leaders play by a very different set of rules. And so I would say you should start by being very mindful of what information you share. Fear based leaders weaponize information. So if you say, man, I can't wait to go to my kid's Little League game, you can bet they'll make you work through the game. You say, I can't wait to go on vacation, they'll take your vacation away. And so it's important to hold your cards much closer to your chest than normal. And then be very mindful of the kind of turning the dials up and down on the information, your availability, and the attention that you give them. Around fear based leaders, availability is leverage. They need people to shore up their ego and they want people to be constantly available. So, one way you can really resist them and reassert power is by deliberately not being available sometimes. Same thing with attention. If you don't show reactions to their bad behaviors, they get bored. It's like, oh, I'm kicking a rock, the rock's not doing anything, so they find something else. And so practice not reacting. Be as inert as possible. Make it so that their gaze glides over you rather than settling on you.
Kate, what's one small daily habit that you have in your life that you've seen make a difference when trying to be productive in cultures that are negative?
Yeah, I think that saying the way the people around me show up is not going to affect the way I show up. I have been in some very aggressive, difficult environments. And in those environments, I would show up and smile, be collaborative, be warm, be friendly, be productive, be efficient. And it infuriated the fear based people around me. How can you be happy? I'm trying to abuse you here. Why are you collaborating with me? What's your secret
Yeah.
angle? And so I would say that no matter what environment you're in, if you like yourself, you should be yourself.
Are there any mentors or coaches in your life who have helped impact the way that you have made changes in your life?
Oh my gosh, so many. I have had wonderful coaches, starting at my time in McKinsey, teaching me how to communicate, how to ask and give feedback, how to think strategically. At McKinsey, I had many wonderful mentors who taught me how to problem solve. Um, in my time, at Meta and Insight Partners, I had a lot of outside mentors and coaches that I was working with who helped me think about nuanced solutions to the problems that I'm seeking. Sometimes when you're in a survival state or something feels really stressful, it feels very black and white. And so I always recommend, whether it's a coach, a therapist, a friend, a mentor, have someone who can help you see those shades of gray.
Kate, where can my audience connect with you? Where can they find the book?
Definitely. So the audience can find the book anywhere books are sold, Barnes& and Noble, Amazon. Also is available as an ebook. You can follow me at katelowry.com, on Instagram at Kate Unbreakable Lowry. I write twice a week on my Substack, katelowry.substack.com, and also am pretty active on LinkedIn. So come say hello. Would love to hear from you. If you have thoughts on the book, I'm all ears.
Yeah, and we'll put all those links in the bottom of the show notes. Kate, I really appreciate the insight, the experience, the authenticity that you're sharing with us. Your work really reminds us that leadership isn't about control. It's about courage, awareness, freedom to empower the people that are around you. So for my audience, you can find Kate's new book, Unbreakable, How to Thrive Under Fear-Based Leaders, pretty much anywhere. For my audience, don't forget to like, subscribe, share this episode with somebody who needs to hear it. Sign up for our newsletter. It's free. We give you all the good stuff. Kate, until next time, thanks so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Mo.
All right.